Welcome to Rock the Vote Leadership Question Time. So tonight's session, I wish to talk about money and what effects on us, our policies, and the way forward. So yes, it's the economy, stupid. And so I'd like to talk about tax, spending, debt, assets, and finances in general. So where does the government get its money from? Clue, it's mainly from us. Where does it spend its money? On our behalf. I said, how much do we owe and what do we own? So the first question about tax, where does the government get its money from? Well, it's mainly from us in various forms of taxation. So it divides in the year 23 to 24. It divides from income tax, so that's $58.9 billion, and that's billion with a B. So that's over half the tax revenue that the government gets is from income tax. And as somebody said, it's interesting that because we tax alcohol to stop people drinking and we tax smoking to stop people smoking. So why do we tax income? So the next big chunk is GST at 29.2. And goods and services tax applies to all sorts of things, probably far more things than it should do. There's corporation tax, and that's at 18.7, and various other taxes. So the total tax revenue is $115.4 billion, which sounds an awful lot of money, and you'd think we'd be thinking rich, really, until you see the next bit. Where does it spend its money? So this is how it breaks down. Unfortunately, if you remember the previous number, it's a lot smaller than this number, the $139 billion that the government is spending on our behalf. And the biggest ticket, of course, is social security and welfare, $44.5 billion. Health comes in at second at 30 billion, and education and government core service and so on. Defense is a measly $3 billion. And then you've got transport, various industrial services, and then all sorts of things about housing, community development, and so on. It's another $7.5 billion. The finance cost at the bottom, that's nearly $9 billion. And that is debt interest. And at our meeting at the Beehive, the Prime Minister said, yeah, I just signed a check for $9 billion. Yeah, what could that buy? Yeah, well, debt is a choice, and we've chosen to be in this debt. And it's what do you do about it? Do you hang on to this debt? Because if you keep spending the way you're spending and the income isn't going up, you're going to accrue more debt and therefore more interest. There is a theory that when your interest payments exceed your defense budget, then you're unlikely to stay a solvent country for much longer. And you can see there that our interest costs are nearly 3 times what we spend on defence. Where does it spend it? Well, if you've got very good eyes, you can see all the portfolios that the current government has. Lots and lots and lots. Tier 1 departments, and then Tier 2 portfolios with ministers. And that spider's web connecting them all. So I would like to simplify it such that you have a reduced number of portfolios which amalgamate lots of the ministries we've had before. It's just an idea, but this could form the basis for our policy working groups that we divide it in these areas under each of the portfolios and so on. Now, what everybody
so how many ministerial portfolios were there, Andrew?
They're recommended, this is from the New Zealand Institute, there are recommended 20 portfolios, and I've got it down to 15 because I've excluded the Prime Minister and I've amalgamated a couple. So I think we need 15 representatives to develop policies in each of those areas. So I'll list, I can probably show it again.
I can see 20 on the screen there, or 19.
Yeah. This is the 20 portfolios that are recommended by the New Zealand Institute.
Yeah.
I've taken that list of 20 and knocked it down to 15 because I think some of them can be amalgamated. And yeah, it kind of makes sense to bring things together as well. And then I've just excluded the Prime Minister's portfolio. That's separate as well. So that's kind of the running of the Prime Minister's office. We don't really need a policy on that. So what do we or the government owe? A remarkable amount, actually, and a lot of people don't know this. So the gross government debt is $175.5 billion as of 2025. That's around 45% of GDP. For New Zealand, that's high, and that's one of the highest figures it's been for a long time. There was a period of time when New Zealand was running a surplus. Happy days. But it seems to be growing in debt, and hence the interest will be growing.
Well, I heard just a couple of days ago, it's doubled in size in the last 5 years, the debt.
Well, I've got the full table. So one of the nice things about trawling around the internet, you can pull down the data for the last 20 or 30 years. And I've compiled that into a spreadsheet, and I can bore you silly with all those details if you really want. But there's been debt for many, many years. And it's just grown and grown and grown. Of course, it grew like topsy during COVID. The downside, of course, is some income has gone down, particularly from tourism as well. So what do we owe? What do we own rather than what do we owe? So we've seen what we owe, but what do we own as a country? So it's remarkable that, did you know that your household has a stake in government assets worth around $275,000? It's a bit like owning a luxury car, but you've got no say in how it's used or how well it's looked after. Here's the catch. The government has borrowed heavily to buy these assets. And the interest payments alone are eating up nearly 4 cents of every tax dollar you pay. But wait, it gets more interesting. The financial returns from these assets don't even cover the borrowing costs. So why does the government own so many things? Do they really need to own all these assets? Could some of them serve New Zealanders better in private hands? And when I go down the list, you might agree or disagree as to what should be in private hands and what should be in public hands. So you can think, well, some are essential services that only the government could do, but others maybe it'd be better in private hands. So the grand total is $571 billion in assets as of 2024. Of this, property, plant and equipment are about 283. So the biggest chunk is in property, plant and equipment. So that would include the buildings for schools and hospitals and so on. But there are other financial assets it has, about 257 billion. So that might include a KiwiSaver and superannuation, maybe. And there's other assets of about 30 billion. So your superannuation fund, this is a major government investment fund, has assets of around $75 to $70 billion. So this is just the list of the state-owned enterprises. So there's a few of them you'd say, yeah, that's got to be done by the government, but other ones, you're really sure? How about, does the government really need to run airlines? Does it need to run a post office or KiwiRail and so on, or other railways? So those in terms of assets are worth 30 or nearly 31 billion. And there's mixed ownership. It tops up to, so the government has got a stake in some of it, tops up to 38 billion. And that includes a lot of energy companies. And so if they're profitable companies and operated well, wouldn't it be better to sell them off? There are crown entities. Now, some of them are running at a loss. Surprise, surprise, Kianga Ora is making an operating loss of 568 million, but it's got assets potentially of 30 billion, sorry, in there. And there's all sorts of other things, like the New Zealand Blood and Organ Institute. It owns New Zealand Lotteries and Pharmaceutical Management Agency and so on. So there's a few which you could think, maybe they could be better in private hands. Why does it need to run television? That's the first thing to go, I would say. And so the grand total of Crown entities is 283 billion.
Propaganda channel.
Propaganda, indeed. So finally, how much money is there sloshing around New Zealand? So I asked it to tot up. How much money is floating around New Zealand in financial transactions? So it's not just the government, it's what does everybody else spend? And that would be the basis of taxation. So a little hint is it at card transactions pops up at 36 billion. But companies reported a total income of 980 billion. Yeah, that's only scraping the surface, really. The total aggregate value of all card payments is 102 billion. And so if you look at the higher value settlements that go through Reserve Bank and the exchange settlement accounts system, you could project an annualized volume in the order of $12 trillion. And that is 12 with 12 zeros on the end of it. That is a bucket load of money in there. So that could be the basis of your economy and your basis of your taxation system, rather than looking at sales tax, income tax, corporation tax, and so on. So there's some notes about those transactions. So combining the settlement volume to get to the 12 trillion number suggests that a total annualized transaction is very large, likely in trillions of dollars. What we're doing there is converting daily amounts into annualized amounts. And so there could be some discrepancies here. So I stand to be corrected in all these numbers. Okay. Yeah. So that's the notes again for the modeling of the economy in terms of financial transactions. And the reason I'm doing that is because I think one of the simplest way of getting rid of the amount of debt we've got is by instituting a financial transaction tax. If you think about it, if you've got a $12 trillion economy, or $12 trillion worth of transactions every year, you could potentially get, well, let's say 120 billion from a 1% or 240 billion from a 2% levy. And that will more than cover your spending and pay off your national debts.